Yo, so the block is hot. I'm up here answering emails and things like that, and I'm getting phone calls from people. There was, I guess, an interview where a female CEO was asked, by who, I don't know, was asked how women can either be like her or go up the ladder or something. And I guess essentially she said, stop working remotely and get in the office. Here's the thing about that. I don't know. And to preface, she said, or she prefaced that she works with hundreds of women, right? She employs hundreds of women. So here's my take on it. First thing, CEO, awesome. I don't know if any CEO really gets to be hands-on with hundreds of their employees like that. But I do know that in context, there's all these fireside chats, skip meetings, all these things that the Human Capital Committee, HR, and leadership always puts together where they ask you these baked questions where you're forced to answer in a way that makes it seem like you probably are dedicated to the company more than you are, right? But everybody's playing a game. So when you do a skip meeting or you sit with leadership, naturally somebody says, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And naturally somebody's going to say as a response, oh, I see myself growing within the company. I want to be in a leadership position, a managerial position, and want to be a larger contributor to our bottom line. I want to have my ideas help the company grow, whatever. And then you also have to ask leadership, how do we get there? And so naturally, the conversation back is, oh, you got to dial in, be dedicated, focus, yada, yada, yada. So I get that from the CEO's perspective, these are probably really what she thinks people are searching for. But it's based on false information, right? If the context is wrong, then so is the framing, and so is the conversation, and so is your findings. Because a lot of us in the corporate space, especially women, are playing the game very well. They know what you want to hear because you put them in a box to force them to answer those questions in that way. But as a CEO, even if you didn't request these skip meetings and these fireside chats and all that, somebody did on your team, and it created this dynamic of now we have to communicate in a way as we're seeing ourselves here 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Who wouldn't do that, especially as a woman working for a female CEO? Come on, dude. So I get when she says, "Hey, I employ hundreds of women," right? The thing is, at your company, those women could be anywhere. they could be an assistant, a secretary, a VP. They could be in the warehouse. They could be in operations. They could be on the creative side. So, in what dynamic is she having specific conversations with each and every one of them about either getting promoted or being in leadership, because that triangle just gets smaller and smaller. Only a certain amount of people are going to be able to get into leadership, right? I've had times where it was me or another guy. The other guy had more tenure. Me or another guy. The other guy was more qualified. I was newer. Great results, but he was more qualified. He'd been there a little bit longer. He had been throughout a little bit more departments than I have. Also, I was an individual contributor at the time. He had been a manager before. All these dynamics factor in. And then even if you get to the tippity top where you are last to interview like me, or you are going for a position that you really want, um, somebody has to not get the position, right? And that's just a part of it. But I want to put that aside. So when my friend told me, she said she employs hundreds of women. I believe that to be true. I believe that she believes what she's saying as the CEO. But here's the context I think that most people in leadership miss outside of the idea of playing the game and corporate politics and having to say the right things. I think that's one thing, but two other very real things happen on how do we even get to this remote space, right? So first is remote first started to become a thing. One, because a lot of tech companies were global organizations. They were pulling in talent from all over the place. I worked for a tech company before where some of our designers were in Spain, My boss was in the New England area. I lived in LA. I had another guy who was in North Cal, and somebody else I think was in Florida. But remote first was in the sense of a lot of these newer companies, these tech companies, finding the best talent. And so they didn't care where you worked as long as you got the job done and helped them scale. Second way remote first became a thing is a lot of companies did not want to continue to pay that cost per square footage, like being in LA. So they moved to another company, another state that was business friendly. Maybe they went to Kentucky. Maybe they went to Texas. Maybe they went to Missouri. All these things, right? Problem is, the further they moved away from the large metropolis, the New York, the Atlantas, the LAs, the further they moved outside of those major cities, the harder it was for them to find talent. At least they felt it was harder. So now you have companies employing remote for the sake of staying competitive. So you got newer companies, tech companies, because they want to be great by any means necessary. And you have older companies trying to save money, relocate their large organizations, but then they had to issue remote approvals so that they could stay competitive. That's the first thing. So the next thing is post COVID, after they laid everybody off, a lot of people they brought back, it was remote. We still didn't know what the COVID thing was. We still didn't know what was next. People still weren't cool going in the office. And then when you even went into the office with some of these companies, to this day, 2026, when you go into the office, it's terrible. They haven't even fixed themselves to be an appropriate space for their employees to work. I talked to somebody else 2 days ago. They work in LA. I won't say, but they work in one of those taller buildings downtown LA. You got to pay for parking and then get reimbursed. So think about it. You got to pay for parking. I think it's like 300-400 a month he has to pay and then get reimbursed. Also, he has to they call it hoteling, I guess. He has to reserve a seat. You want me to come to work? I got to reserve a seat so that I can have a place to work. So they just made it very inconvenient. So you have people so remote started because of competition, and then you have remote like becoming and staying because of everything that happened post pandemic, right? But here's the very real thing that happened in the midst of this remote changeover, the pandemic. And when a lot of people saw how companies treated their employees, when those employees went back, because they saw their company treat them like they saw their company treat them bad, then they saw other companies treat their employees bad. So when people started to take these jobs back, the main thing that changed was the old identity and old programming tied to working it's gone. It's completely changed, right? So I always say there's like what's required at your job. This is how I used to tell my employees. Hey, you got what's required. Then you're gonna have stretch goals. So this is what's reasonable, right? Like corporate America is always gonna try to dance between what's required and what's reasonable. We always gonna try to get you to do a little bit more. But I think CEOs really take a liking to people and the group of people who did like ridiculous, which what I would say is above reasonable. They would go well above and beyond, pull more than needed all-nighters, pull more than needed long hours, stay in the office more times than needed, travel more times than needed, sit on more calls than needed, et cetera, et cetera. These people typically stood out. The problem is these people were typically women who stood out, and in the midst of these women who were standing out, let me pause. The problem is these people who stood out have also changed to become somebody who does not want to do more than what is reasonable. And so now you have CEOs looking around like, hey, where's my people who used to love to pull the all-nighters and we order pizza and I give you a gift card after you help me make another 100 million? Those people aren't around anymore. Now most people are dedicated to, I mean, it's cliche, but preserving their mental and physical health. So they will go to what's reasonable, but that extra, that ridiculous, you're not seeing that anymore. So here's where the CEOs are in this tough spot because we all still have to play the game. And especially women working for women, you have to say and ask those questions about how do you get promoted and how do you end up in these spaces and how did you do it? Even if you don't care, you don't. I think a lot of people have figured out I need to live within my means. Um, and do I want a VP spot? Do I want a C-suite spot? Do I want a director spot? Do I want a senior director spot? If I take one of these spots, what does it do to my work-life balance? What is the actual pay that I get now after taxes with this salary bump? Am I willing to do that work? Another thing is because of how the employees are treated, a lot of these people aren't willing to prove themselves through trial and error before you promote them, right? Now everybody is saying, treat me like a, a, a NBA draft pick. My performance in high school was was good enough for the coach to see I had potential. So they gave me a scholarship to this college. My performance in college amongst this competition was good enough for the the scouts in the NBA to think that I should be a first, second, third round draft pick. Don't ask me to come play in the NBA while I'm still in college. Like you can draft me and then we can see if I live up to my potential. But I'm not doing director work as a manager anymore and not getting paid for it. I'm not going to be the interim CRO until you fill that position with somebody from outside the company. I'm not going to be the interim ops person while you figure out who you really want to be there or while you're negotiating for somebody who you're going to pay more than I was going to ask for anyway. I think people are definitely tired of that. So I get the conversation that the female CEO is having as a female getting asked by females. I just think the issue is people and CEOs specifically don't really understand that a lot of these people, and then just not talking about me, but a lot of people have committed to, I'm going to do excellent work within what's required of my job. And that's it. And so when you don't see them pulling those all-nighters or showing up to extra things that they used to and this and that, that's just where they are now. And so as you hear people ask you about how do I make it or how do I go further, they're kind of just doing it because that's what people have to do when they talk to somebody in your position. And I hope that doesn't like ruffle any feathers. And I don't think that CEO was trying to ruffle feathers. I think she is responding and dissecting the information that she has and making an assessment. The problem is the assessment is based off, I don't know, wrong information or maybe not the best information. You know what I mean? We've all laughed at a joke before that we thought wasn't funny. It's what's funny, and what makes me think about the CEO is I remember I was out with my boss and we were around his boss. This is years ago. We were around his boss and he laughed at a joke that my boss laughed at a joke that his boss told and it wasn't funny. And my boss doesn't laugh at jokes. So when his boss left, I said, "Oh, you are an award. You deserve a SAG card." And he laughed, but it's just a thing. This is just what people do when they're around leadership. It's unfortunate that you can't kind of be yourself, but I don't know if leadership will really want you to be yourself, right? So I don't know. What do y'all think? But I hope people didn't miss. I hope people don't try to like beat her up about what she said. I hope you just kind of got to understand that a lot of these CEOs are getting the wrong information coming their way, or no information at all, and so they have to make a judgment based on what the VPs are telling them, or the people who are just saying what we're supposed to say, playing the corporate game, are saying. That's it. Peace.